Hello, welcome to this flipped preaching video. My name's Andy and we're going to have a look at another really interesting passage from the book of Luke, and we're going to see how we might sort of learn some lessons for how we live. Now this one is a totally challenging passage. It's one of those where Jesus is giving some teaching. It's one where he tells us how we should be, and it's really tough, really hard, but brilliant. Okay, so it's Luke 6:27 to 38. I'll put a link in the description below, but you should go and have a look at this. They're quite well-known words. They're sort of phrases which have made their way into everyday language in some places, but it's, if we really get down to it, it's very tricky. Okay, so a few weeks ago we had the passage where Jesus calls Peter and James and John to leave their fishing nets. This is a bit of old fishing nets Susie found on the beach. To leave their fishing nets behind and instead to become fishers of people, or catch people for life is a better translation. This is my painting for the month. I do a painting each month which I use. So this is the one to try and give a sense of the nets that have been left behind. Near Peel Castle there's a place where, I don't know what it actually is, but it's a place where it looks like fishing nets go to die. So I thought I'd do a picture of some of those. I thought the colours were interesting. Anyway, so they had to leave behind what they were doing so that they could bring people to life. The idea of catching fish is, it's not actually good news for the fish when you're caught. So Luke changes it around and says you're going to catch people for life, catch them for life. So what does it mean what do we have to leave behind in order to catch people for life? In this passage, I think we've got some ideas. So the first chunk, Jesus is talking about how we need to love our enemies, how we need to pray for the people who are mistreating us. Okay, well that's hard to start with. Then he gets into a line which has become a very commonplace saying, the idea of turning the other cheek. Now, this passage is often used to mean that you become a bit of a doormat, that you just let people walk over you. But I don't think that's what Jesus was saying at all. Okay, let me just unpack one little thing. Firstly, it's about hitting people on the face. Okay, we're just going to go into this in a little bit of depth. Firstly, it was all about the right hand. You never did anything with your left hand, actually. It's about your right hand. So Jesus was saying, if someone, backtracking a little bit, there are basically two ways to hit someone with your right hand. You can give them a back slap, and that would end up hitting their right cheek, or you can give them a palm slap or a punch, which means that you hit them on their left cheek. So Jesus says, when someone strikes you on the right cheek, that's a back slap. Turn the other cheek, so they have to hit you like that. Okay, now there's an important thing going on here. The back slap was a type of hit that you did when you were a superior and there was someone inferior to you in the way that society worked in the day. So, for instance, men would hit women like that. Parents would hit children like that. It was a sign of saying, I'm above you, you're an inferior. So when Jesus says, if someone does that to you, turn the other cheek, that means that you're saying, no, you hit me as an equal. You hit me as if I'm a person of equal status to you. And that puts the person in a really awkward position, because they were being condescending to you, back slap on one to start with, and now you're saying, no, you hit me on this cheek as an equal. And what do? Do they carry on? Do they go off? It's a fascinating way of looking at this. It's the person who's being backslapped, the person who's being put down, they get their own way. They kind of fight back, but they do it in a non-violent way. Now, this passage and the bits that follow were a total inspiration to Gandhi and a total inspiration to Martin Luther King, both of whom had a non-violent way of standing up to oppression. So Jesus isn't telling us to be a doormat and to let people walk over you. He's saying you don't fight back evil with evil, but you've got to find a clever way of turning it around so they treat you as a decent human being. They stop being condescending. And the same idea comes out in the other two examples that he mentions. So if somebody sues you and tries to take your cloak, give them also your undergarment. People back then only had, if you were poor, you typically had 2 items of clothing. A kind of cloak that you didn't really need in the daytime, but you kind of slept on at night. It was like a mat and a cloak if it got cold. And your undergarment, like a tunic that you wore against your body all the time. So Jesus was saying, if somebody sues you and takes your coat, you also give them your undergarment. That would mean that you were naked. In the law court, you would basically strip naked, give them everything, and walk out. And that would bring great shame on the person who took you to court in the first place. And then the thing about the Roman soldier, if someone asked you to carry their bag for a mile, Roman soldiers could do that. They were allowed to get sort of peasants from the lands they had occupied to carry their bag, but for 1 mile only. And the authorities were really aware of the fact that this was deeply unpopular, and they really had harsh restrictions on the soldiers to limit it so it was just 1 mile. So if you carried this Roman soldier's bag an extra mile, that puts the soldier in a really awkward position. It's not fighting back against the opposing oppressing force, but it's doing something really peaceful, and it's putting the soldier in the place that he has to beg you to get his bag back. So it's a really clever way of non-violently opposing power. And as I say, that was the inspiration between Gandhi's non-violent protest against the British rule in India and Martin Luther King's non-violent protest in order to achieve racial equality in America. So fantastic. So for us today, if ever we're in the situation where we're oppressed by someone else, when we're being oppressed by another person, we need to think of a way of standing up to it in a non-violent way. And there's a challenge there of how we creatively do that. Probably, actually, today, if you're watching this video, you're probably wealthy enough to be in the position where people don't oppress you. And in which case, the onus is on us to therefore not be like that to other people, to not be the sort of person who looks down on people, who smacks people around the cheek, who's condescending, who sues people who are poor for the little that they have. Okay, so let's push on. There's a brilliant thing at the end of this as well, which I think is wonderful. It says, "Be merciful, just as your heavenly Father is merciful." So that's a good rule to live by. Always show mercy, because God shows mercy too. Don't judge, and you won't be judged. Okay, that's really, really so important, so powerful. Do not judge. I know that I find that hard. I think I don't know if everyone does, it's kind of wired into us to assess who's around us and to judge them and to rank them and to put them into people who are useful, people who are not useful, people who are higher status than us, people who are lower status than us. That judgmentalism, Jesus says, don't judge. Don't judge. It's really, really, really powerful, life-changing message. So we're going to leave it there. There's plenty on here to work on. Be merciful. Don't judge. Fight oppressive power in a non-violent way. That's a good way to live. Okay, I'd love to hear how you interpret this passage, how you think that works for you in reality. Tell me in person if you bump into me. Perhaps leave a comment below. That would be lovely. Okay, we'll leave it for now. See you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.